You are so stinking cute. This is day 2 with my Mustang for the Kentucky Extreme Mustang Makeover, which is a 100-day training competition where you take a wild Mustang and you gentlemen train them to compete in a competition at the end of the time frame. So this is Stitch. He is a 4-year-old BLM Mustang gelding captured from the Paisley Desert, Oregon herd management area. This is his first grooming ever. He was a wild Mustang just the day prior. If you go back, you can watch our first day. It's split into 2 parts and it shows start to finish how we spent our first day together. He is probably around the 45th Mustang that I've gentled and trained, but he is the first Mustang that I'm taking for a 100-day training competition where I have to actually ride them for the competition. So it's going to be quite the journey and I'm super excited about it. Right here you can see that he's pretty wiggly about being brushed. He wasn't really sure what was going on and how to stand still. Granted, he was a wild horse just the day prior, and getting groomed for the first time, it's really unusual for them and they don't fully understand what it is. So it takes them a little bit to figure it out, and as you can see, as we progress through that grooming session, he starts to stand still and I think he enjoys it a lot. So this is the beginning of our session. Now I'm showing him the flag stick for the second day in a row, and I'm just trying to get him used to doing some desensitizing while tied up, because lots of scary things can happen to a horse while they're tied up, and you don't want them to get so freaked out because they're in a different environment that they want to pull back and freak out. So even though he's had all this desensitizing done while I have a hold on him, I want him to get used to and get in the habit of being tied up and having that same scary stuff happen. I've had lots of horses that can have tons of desensitizing done, but once they're tied up and they're on their own, they will freak out and they can get themselves in some pretty dangerous situations. So I want to tackle all of it while I can. I'm going to show him everything I can. I want him to be super educated and have a very safe life as a domestic horse. So in order for that, I need to expose him to all sorts of situations, desensitize him, and just prepare him for his life as a domestic horse. Next, I'm going to go ahead and desensitize him to the whip again. I did this the day prior as well, but at the beginning of the session, I want to go over it all over again. As you can see, he's a little bit nervous about it. He wants to wiggle around a little bit, and it's a weird thing, you know, with strings flying through the air and landing over his back. It doesn't hurt him, but it's a really weird feeling. So I'm just trying to get him to stop moving his feet. If you see any popping on his rope, that slight popping is just to kind of check in with him. It's really important that you establish that basic respect as well as that connection with the wild horse in the beginning, because it's really easy for them to take advantage of you tiptoeing around them as a wild horse, and you can get yourself hurt. So I'm never going to be forceful with him, I'm never going to be rough on him, but if I have to, I'm going to step in and give him a pop or two, just to check in with him and be like, hey, you still have to respect me. So there I'm just letting that whip sit over his back and trying to see that he'll stand still, and as soon as he stands still, I'm going to take it off of him. And I'm trying to just remind him that I need him to stop moving his feet. And like I said, whenever he stops moving his feet, that whip's going to come off of him, and that's his reward. That's a release of pressure, and he's going to learn from that. So I'm cutting out a little bit of anything that's repeated a lot, just because with the Wi-Fi I have where I'm at now, I can't really upload too long of videos. So I love to show you guys every single bit, but when a lot of things are getting repeated, I'm going to cut it out. I'm not going to skip anything important, but just anything that's just going to be happening over and over again. So, you know, a minute later, he's still struggling with this, wanting to wiggle a little bit. He's a bit more distracted. He has a little bit more energy to him. But I'm just going to keep working with him on this. I want him to be able to stand and tolerate the whip swinging over his back. And I'm just keeping my energy low. My energy never gets high, it never gets intimidating. I keep myself at a nice low energy level because he's going to feed off of that and pick up on that. So that's what I want. So I'm not going to let myself get irritated or anxious or impatient. If I keep my energy low and calm, he's going to feed off of that and he's going to do the same thing. So now that he was standing and tolerating the whip swinging over his back on that side, I'm going to switch to the opposite side because I do everything from both sides. It's very good for them. One thing that they can be comfortable with on the left side can be absolutely terrifying on the right. So I want to make sure I cover it from both sides. And at this point, something that I've noticed with Stitch is that once he gets comfortable and he understands something on one side of his body, it carries over to the other side. He's not one of those horses where you have to reset with each side you swap to. So he did really good with that. He was not bothered at all. He was nice and relaxed, which I really like to see. He can still be a little bit sticky with his leading considering he just learned how to do it yesterday. And right there, I'm leaning down towards his haunches to disengage them, which he does really great with. He's picked up on all of it super fast. I like to establish all of the easy stuff early on so that it carries over later on. Here I'm showing him the tarp again, and he's doing great. Everything that we did yesterday has carried over. Sometimes you have to reset after the first day, but he has carried everything over, which is really nice. He has a really good brain on him, and even though he has some sass and attitude in there, like any horse, his brain is really nice. He's very smart, and he thinks everything through, and I just really like the way he thinks. Stitch already knows how to send and lunge over the tarps, but this time I'm encouraging him to walk towards me for it, and he wants to check it out, which I'm not going to discourage. I want curiosity, so I'm going to let him look at it before I start encouraging him to step towards me, and just let him figure it out. And since he wasn't getting it and he just had sticky feet, I decided to send him over the tarp just to show him what the right answer was and to make it more clear to him. So what I'm about to start doing here usually looks pretty stupid, but it's so important for these guys. It's desensitizing to motion. I'm going to start introducing him to me jumping around him and rubbing on him while I'm jumping. And this is really good prep work for when you start to go get on them. But at the same time, it's really good so that they get used to you doing something other than just walking. Because if you ever stumble or trip or someone runs past, if they're not used to seeing people doing something other than just walking around them, they get pretty spooked, so I like to desensitize them to that pretty early on. It's really important, and he does not seem too bothered by it. For some reason, he had a problem with the rope wiggling around by his feet or swinging over his back, and that's something really important to cover. So you can see when he's wiggling around, I'm just flexing his head in and back to get him to stop moving his feet, and he kind of scared himself there for a moment. But I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing. I'm going to keep my energy low, and keep swinging this rope over his back until he gets his feet to stop moving and he calms down. I just want him to realize that it's not going to hurt him, and something swinging over his back like that isn't scary or something for him to get anxious about. And since he was back to being calm with the rope swinging over his back, I decided to do some cinch prep. And for that, I'm going to swing the rope over and underneath him and grab it on the other side. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little bit of pressure on his stomach with it, just so he knows what a cinch feels like. And that kind of just prepares them for it before there's something scary on their back. So now I'm going to go ahead and show him the saddle pad, and I make sure I let all the horses smell what it is before I go and start rubbing their body with it and before I put it on his back. And he smelled it a little bit, but he really didn't care too much. He was kind of watching back to see what I was doing as I rubbed the saddle pad all over him, but he was pretty calm and he honestly didn't care too much about it. It was more like he just wanted to know what was going on. And I'm going to do the exact same thing from the other side, and right before I put it back on, I always double check with them and make sure they can smell it again. He did really good. So it's the same thing with the saddle. I'm going to show it to him before I bring it up to his side. He was a little bit curious about it, but not too much, and he wasn't too sure what to think, but he kept his calm. He kept his feet still, which is what I like, and he was just taking it all in. And I made sure I wiggled it around a little bit, and I gave him some prep work with me swinging it up and down next to his body before I placed it on his back. And he did really good with that. He did not care too much. You can see he's a little bit unsure, but he's still thinking it through instead of just reacting, which is always a nice thing to see out of them. And I wasn't too worried about it needing so much adjustment. It was more prep work for him. And I'm making sure that I do not cinch him up until the saddle's in the correct placement. The last thing I want is to cinch him up and then start wiggling everything around, because then if the girth isn't tight enough and he freaks out or he gets scared, the saddle can slide, which would scare him even more. So I want to make sure everything's in the right positioning before I decide to cinch him up, just to prepare him for the best possible outcome. So once he's cinched up, I step away from him and I get behind his drive line and I start encouraging him to step forward. And he is a very low energy horse, so I gave him a little bit more energy. And once I got a few steps, I was pretty happy with that, but I just wanted to keep the energy going until I saw he had a consistent walk. So once you see that he's walking consistent, you can tell that my energy level goes down, and it only gets picked up when he needs that encouragement for forward movement. I'm not too worried about him lunging a perfect circle right now. I'm going to move with him. I just want to encourage forward movement, and I want to keep him on a line in case he does get scared, that I can guide him through it, versus if he didn't have a lead on, he could just get himself into a tricky situation. So I'm moving with him. I'm encouraging him to move forward. I just want him to keep getting that forward movement and learn that he can open himself up and he doesn't need to get stuck. So I'm just going to keep driving him forward. And as soon as I see him at a nice point where he's moving forward and he's confident, I'm going to ask him to stop so that I can reward him for what he's doing, because he's doing really well. And I'm always going to ask for that haunches to disengage away from me before I step into him. He did really, really good with that. Now it's the exact same thing going the other way. I'm going to get behind his drive line and start encouraging him to step forward. Now that he's figured out he can move forward, you can see he has a lot more energy this direction. He's not as much of a slow, dead walk. It is him driving himself forward. And where I got out of frame, he kind of got stuck and turned his butt to me. So I'm just going to keep encouraging him forward. I'm going to kind of keep his nose tucked into me, because as soon as he gets by that gate, he tries to turn into it. And I just want to see him confident and his feet moving free. And I want to keep that nose tucked into me. And I'm getting a little bit stuck there, but I'm just trying to keep him going forward. I don't want his butt to keep turning to me, because that's when he can get kicked, especially with a horse that hasn't been around people for that long. I want him to learn that he can't do that and just keep his feet moving. And, turning his butt to me is a big no-no. So that helps when I disengage his haunches away from me every time I stop. As far as movement goes, that's all I wanted to see from him, is that he could go each direction and just get a little bit more forward. That's all I wanted. Now I'm just rubbing on him a little bit. I'm rubbing the saddle. I'm desensitizing him to the stirrups moving and me tapping the saddle. And that's all I wanted to do before I decided to take him out of the round pen and end that session. So I was going to bring him back up to the barn and let him get brushed down, go in his stall for a little bit, and just hang out. You can see he's a little bit nervous. There's people around, but he keeps his cool. He gets a little bit more forward, but he still respects my space, which is nice. It's also a really great exposure for him to have so many people walking around, so many horses moving out and about, just so much commotion going on, because right away off the bat he is getting exposed to so much, and it's going to make him a really quiet horse. This is the end of part 1 of day 2 with Stitch. I had to cut it in 2 parts just because of the internet that I have where I'm currently living. I don't want you guys to have to wait any longer because I've been battling trying to upload it for a month now, so I just decided to split it in 2 parts. Second part of day 2 will be up pretty shortly. I don't want you guys to have to wait, so stay tuned so you guys can keep following Stitch's journey.